on that when I talk?
Right now?
Yeah.
Are you talking?
Yeah, I'm talking.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
No?
Nope. Oh, they fixed that. It used to be when you were...
Did you turn the mic off over there?
Welcome to Hermit Woods, where there's a story in every bottle.
Seriously, it's Monday, and here we are. This is the Hermits. We are drinking again on Monday. Welcome, everyone.
Clearly, we're not.
Well, you hid your can.
I thought we were going to discuss that.
We didn't. It was just mentioned. Hello, everyone.
There's no wine in my... Hi, everyone.
There's no wine in there.
Yes.
We should have some wine in there. We will have some wine in
We'll
there.
have some wine. Let's
But we're going to talk about stuff today, though. We're gonna dig in on barrels, on wood, right?
Yeah, I thought that would be fun. I actually did some learning. I was listening to another wine podcast and learned a lot about some different wine storage methods, more than I already know. Of course, we only use a couple different methods here, so
far.
That was easy so far. Yeah, no, I have a feeling there'll be other opportunities down the road for sure. But yeah, storing wine is a really great question, and all the ways in which we store our wine and the ways in which that affects the finished wine.
Yeah.
There's so many variables. I mean, we talked about this so many times. It was just hundreds of thousands of different variations from the time the grapes or the fruit or whatever it is you're making your wine from grows, and the way Mother Nature treats it, and the soil, and all the way through to harvest, and then all the variables that winemakers get to choose in how to handle that fruit, and all of those variations. And then when you get to aging the wine in the different containers and the way in which those different containers, it just goes on and on and on.
And this is,
how do you keep it all in your head?
Most people think of wine as this, as a bottle of wine.
Right.
And you open that wine and you drink that wine. You don't think of all the stuff that's gone up to that point and what's in process to carry out if you leave it in the bottle.
Right, it just keeps changing.
So it just keeps changing.
Like you always say, it's a living product.
It's a live thing. It's morphing, it's growing, it's changing.
Right.
Yeah.
So before we go on anymore, let's check in with our audience here and go over some of the basics for any newcomers to the show.
I saw Matt was already on there, and Priscilla, and Matt could hear us. Yes, we were testing our overdub capabilities, Matt.
You guys know by now that the learning curve on this new technology is steep, and I clearly have not figured it out just yet. So we'll get there, though. Don't you worry. But a couple things before we go on anymore for any new viewers that might be there. If you're watching live with us right now, we'd love it if you'd click the bell in the corner of the page for Facebook viewers. That will subscribe you to our Facebook feed, and you'll get notice of any time we go live. And we've been known to go live while riding 40 miles an hour down the road on a triple. So you never know when we might go live. So
or on a chairlift.
Or on a chairlift, exactly. Yeah. So hit that button and you're going to find out what adventure we're on when we go live next. And if you're on YouTube, right here is a subscribe button. You can subscribe to our channel and you'll also be notified when we go live. If you're just watching us right now, like our page, like this broadcast, share it with your friends if you think you have friends that will enjoy hearing what we have to say. And please let yourself be known. Make a comment in our comment section. Just say hello, if you will, so we know you're watching. And if you have questions, as always, ask your questions and we'll do our best to answer them. And we have a couple folks on with us already. As Ken said, Matt and Priscilla are here.
Yep.
It's great to see you, Matt. Sorry you couldn't make our show last week. We missed you. We had your Chex Mix. We were sampling your Chex Mix on the show. Maybe you watched it since then. So thank you for that. And let's see, Priscilla says there is a movement for environmental friends. One sweet.
Janice is here. Well, finally, as you go on sending me into eternity.
Well, that's interesting. I don't know anything about that. I'll have to look into that.
It's kind of like the plant a tree. You know? You bury yourself and go back into the earth, and a tree grows up from that. And
and Priscilla mentioned something. This is really, we hadn't talked about this last time, but as many of you know, I would say probably all of you know, we were in the running. We were one of the 20 nominees to be listed as the USA Today, one of the 10 best tasting rooms in America.
In the whole country.
In the country.
A USA Today.
And 5 days before they turned off the rating, so you can't see where we stood. We were in 5th place, and the voting ended on Monday, and I know many of you voted just every day and really helped us out. It was really great.
Yeah, it's great.
So we're hoping, if all goes well, we'll end up in the top 10 list. And we're going to know, I think, on the 13th.
I think that's right.
Yeah, so stay tuned, because you can bet as soon as I know, you will know.
Yes,
sure.
Absolutely.
So, and Jeff is here too. So good to see you, Jeff. Thanks.
Is Gary here? So I see Gary?
Gary's here, yes.
Oh, Gary.
Oh, look what we have, Gary. We have lots to talk about today, but I think we need to try that.
Yes.
We need to try that. So Gary, for those of you who don't know, he has a friend who shared with him some wines that they made in their own cellar many years ago.
This is a more recent one.
Yes.
But it's a blueberry one, so I thought it'd be nice because we're going to sample a couple of our blueberry wines.
So
we could have this one as well. 2012.
From Costanzo's.
Costanzo's wine cellar.
Costanzo's wine cellar.
Yes.
So hopefully we'll get to dig into that before the end of the episode. So thank you, Gary, for sharing that with us. So let's get back to...
Let's put some wine in the glass, don't you think?
I don't know wine in my glass.
I know. Chuck isn't here to really get to egg us on. He's off flying again.
Yes.
And he will join us in Denver right now.
Yeah. That's where I saw him.
Drinking hard seltzer or something like that.
Yeah. I don't know.
So I have pairs of wines here. I have 2 wines in skinny bottles, 2 meads. We have our 3 Honey wine and our 3 Honey Gold. And the reason I chose those is they're very delicate floral meads. They're just honey and water and yeast that go into making these. And this one, our regular 3 Honey wine, spends its entire life in a stainless steel tank, never sees any oak at all, no oak chips, no oak barrels. The exact same liquid is also split and put into an oak barrel that previously had a red wine in it. And so this delicate wine shows the difference between non-oak aged and oak aged. We can try them side by side.
Great.
And here I have another pair, which is our Petite Blue and our Petite Blue Reserve. The Petite Blue spends its whole life in stainless steel, but it has oak staves suspended in the tank. So you don't get any of the breathing of a barrel, and I know we're going to go into this more in the program here, but you get some of the flavor from the oak into the wine.
And those staves are actually toasted.
Yes, these are toasted the same way you would toast the inside. Yes, so this is a Burgundy toast, which is a blend. There's a very dark one here. There's a light one. So they're different toast levels that are then strung together. And this is known as, they have Bordeaux blends, they have Burgundy blends. Very typically, people will have barrels of different toast levels to give different flavors to the wine. And if it's done really well, you don't know what sort of toast levels or how many barrels. You just know this wine tastes fantastic. And the French take it to a high art and really have a more subdued background to it. And there's some great phrases around the sorts of things that the French do with oak and others in Europe, as opposed to probably the 90s and early 2000s when we thought of California wines. A lot of those were really heavy on the oak to match that heavy, jammy, rich, fruit-forward wine. It was a real, impressive wine, but it was also a bit overpowering for some.
There's a trend, as I understand from listening.
It's pulling back.
Yeah, it's pulling back. People are starting to really want less oak in their wines.
Right.
And it's a good trend.
No, I like that. It's maturing. It's growing up and as it goes
evolving.
forward.
But
Evolving.
Just so people who, if you don't know, the toasting of a barrel is simply the process of holding. They flip the barrels over an open flame, and they burn the inside of the barrel to varying degrees. And there are there's a fairly significant scale of variation that you can choose from. It's a lot of people talk about light, medium, and heavy toast, but there are variations within that in between. And barrel producers, as I've researched in preparation for this show, winemakers and barrel producers have a partnership and a relationship, and the barrel producers produce barrels very precisely to the demands of the winemaker, who calls for that barrel to be built in a certain way, made from certain woods. The woods are aged a certain a certain amount of time, and that barrel is custom made for that winery. You pay for that service.
Oh yeah,
but it is.
We won't be having any of those.
So while you're opening that, I'm going to go and show some pictures of. We're talking about containers of wine. So I wanted to share with you some other vessels that let's see if I can find it here.
High tech here, folks.
I know. Here, where is my? One second, bear with me. I know it's here.
You can take all the time you want. I'm going to be drinking mead.
Oh, great. I don't know why I don't see
you just had them up there a moment ago.
I know.
You got this. You actually had it all organized.
I will get
before
it.
the show.
Yeah,
you'll get it.
I will find it.
While you were looking, one of the other things I didn't finish in my statement. That's the end of your photos, right?
Yeah, this is not. This isn't it. So I have to find the window.
One of the things I didn't finish saying was that we have our regular Petit Bleu, which is in stainless steel and with oak staves suspended in it. And the other bottle right next to it is our Petit Bleu Reserve. And this is actually, today, we're releasing the 2018 vintage of the Petit Bleu Reserve. We've sold out of the 19. So this is a little backwards. And the reason the 18 is coming out after the 19 is this stayed in barrel an extra year. This was an experiment.
Okay.
And you haven't had this one yet.
I haven't. Okay. So we're going to get to that in a second. I did find my screen. Everybody should be able to watch what I'm looking at right now. This was obviously our intro screen. And you can see here we are amongst some of our barrels.
We're smiling and drinking, weren't we?
Aren't we always? So there's how many barrels in our cellar right now? 50?
No, we're down to 42, actually. I had some barrels that are past their prime, and they've been removed from the quiver. So we'll be buying new ones.
We've only removed 4, right?
4, yeah, removed 4.
We had more than 50 at one point.
No, we were 48 or something like that.
I lost count. Anyway, there's a bunch of barrels down there.
There's a lot of barrels.
42 or 48?
50 of them.
Doesn't really
50
matter.
of them.
What matters is there's barrels in our basement filled with wine that are
Lots of
aging
barrels.
away to be made into wine in the future. So these are our barrels. And we also use stainless steel, as you all know. So here's Ken happily
That's
enjoying
right after we installed those.
Yes, the installation of our new stainless steel. So we use here in this winery right now as storage vessels, barrels, and stainless,
and glass.
And glass.
Glass carboys.
Yes, that's right. Third way. I didn't talk about glass in this presentation. So here's a winery. I got a picture. This winery is using oak barrels. They're using amphoras, and they're using
rainbow-colored.
I know, that's kind of strange.
Wires or wraps.
And they're using stainless steel. Yeah. So amphoras is one of the oldest. Actually, do you think amphoras came before oak? Probably, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, way
absolutely.
Before.
Yeah, way before.
Way before. So amphoras,
the country of Georgia as well is known for their wine production in amphoras
that
are buried.
They bury them in the ground,
quarry.
And it controls the temperature.
Yeah, it's for temperature control. They live in a really hot area.
Yeah. So amphoras are and they're growing in popularity. People are making wine in this method more and more, and new wine regions are adopting this method, not just the old world.
See, Bob, this is the thing. If you have Riesling, and you grow Riesling every year, and you have vines of Riesling, and you have Riesling that you're going to make Riesling yet again this year, and you made Riesling last year, you start thinking of ways to make that Riesling a little more interesting. Maybe an amphora, maybe an oak barrel, maybe an egg. So you come up with these things.
So that's the amphora, and then another. This is a variation on oak. So oak barrels are smaller, and so the exposure of wood to wine is higher.
Right.
Because of the ratio of the volume of liquid in the barrel. And in this case, they use barriques, which allow two things. One, large volumes of storage, and also you can ferment in these. They have a big wide top. It's really hard to ferment.
What's the difference between a barrique and a fodder?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Because that's what these tall, upright, cylindrical oak things are called fodders. And barriques, I thought, have the same barrel-like shape. They're just gigantic.
That might be it. That might be
I'm not sure. So I'm not sure that what you're showing there is the fodder. That might be a fodder.
Okay.
And those other things in the back
might be barriques.
Are barriques.
So either way, both of these provide the winemaker opportunities to both ferment in barrel in a larger scale and also age with less exposure to oak because of the volume to liquid to oak. So both you can see here they're fermenting in this vessel, and that's the fruit actually coming out.
They're digging it out after the fermentation,
right?
Yeah, they're getting ready for press there.
And then concrete. And concrete's been around a long time too. Yeah. I don't know. I think it was this century, or the last century when concrete was introduced. Yeah. It was introduced in France.
Yeah, the 1900s, Provence.
Yeah.
They produce, a lot of wine there, and Chateauneuf and elsewhere use cement. I'm hearing a little echo. Is the volume all the way off there?
Yes, but it's always the case. So we can't do it. We won't pick it up here. So. Okay. So there's a couple things. And remember the concrete tanks in California? They were the size of a building.
Those silos.
Yeah. So
gigantic silos.
For years, the concrete tanks, both in France and in California, were lined. Mm-hmm. Because they really they were trying to achieve the same results you achieve with stainless steel, a non-interactive container to store large volumes of wine.
And the other advantage to cement, for the strength, you have to build it thick.
Right.
And when you build it thick, it acts as a thermal buffer.
Temperature control.
So it's a temperature control. Yeah.
So and later on, they started actually leaving the liner out because they realized that because of the porousness of cement, there is actually air contained in the pores of the cement, and that air, like with a barrel, interacts
with micro-ox
with the wine and micro-ox. So that's varying ways in which cement has changed over the years. And when I visited France, I saw several that looked just like that, rows of cement tanks. Yeah. And so it's pretty common in France. And then the concrete egg got invented, and it was actually in France that was first invented. Yeah. And this became useful in not only did it give you all the benefits of the concrete, but it gave you this opportunity because of the dynamics of the liquid in that space. As the fermentation process engages, it creates heat. That heat rises up through the center of the egg it hits the top of the egg where it begins to cool because it's concrete and it controls the temperature very well. And as it cools, it drops down the side of the egg.
The outsides, right.
The outside, and starts this thermal cycle where heat rises and it actually allows the liquid to interact more completely with the skins that are in the container.
Well, that's what I've always thought of too when you think about a big cylinder or a tote that you ferment in. So most people ferment their red wines in these plastic bins, and you could have hundreds of them, and it's really easy to punch them down and then press them off. But the being straight on the edges, all the cap rises and all is exposed to the air. Right. But because the egg comes up, pinches out towards the top, it constricts the cap, so the liquid is more saturated in the cap. Right. And then once that convection gets going, it changes everything.
Circulates it. Yeah. So a lot of wineries across the country, across Europe for sure, and definitely across the country. And look, this winemaker has a bike in the shop, just like you. And so these are becoming more popular, and it would be fun. I hope someday we get to have an egg.
The big bucks.
Big bucks, I know.
Big bucks.
Even bigger bucks, because they're only made in one place in the U.S. and they're made in California, and the cost to ship that baby across country.
I bet.
They're pretty heavy.
We can get a plastic one from Flex Tank.
Yeah, maybe not. So the last picture here is the modern stainless steel tank. Yep. These are the most common ways in which people store wine. We have the technology now to craft these stainless steel tanks in any size and in any shape, and they're being used widely across the industry. They don't impact the wine in any way. They're simply storage vessels.
Yeah.
And their shape impacts the wine.
Oh yeah, the shape definitely does.
And you, with the stainless steels, you can see these heating and cooling jackets require a lot more work to heat and cool, unlike the eggs, which we maintain much more stable of a temperature. So there's some
that's good.
Some information about the various ways in which you can store wine. But today we really want to dig in on oak and barrels and staves.
Well, that's true. I think it comes through in all the conversations here that there are a lot of activities that are taken in any wine cellar prior to that wine ever going into bottle, but the end user just sees that bottle. So it's hard to know what's actually gone into it. When we do our write-ups for our spring release for our club members, we try to write up how the fermentation process took place, what we did, to just give you a better understanding of what goes on behind the scenes. And it's really a time frame. When the fruit comes in, the clock starts ticking. And that fruit is either going to degrade if it just sits out in the air, or you have the opportunity to let these microbes convert the sugars into alcohol. And the environment in which you do that affects the results and sets in motion what's going to happen down the road. So you design a wine right up front. You decide, okay, I'm just going to ferment this without the skins. I'm going to squeeze it off and I'm going to ferment just the juice. Or I'm going to keep it on the skins a long time. Or I'm going to do some combination of that. You set in motion the end result, flavor profile, stability of the wine, its ageability, all of that.
And it still, I have to say this again, it boggles the mind how many choices that you have to make.
It's infinite.
And
that's what's kind of fun. I mean, that's where you see all these different capabilities, let alone the mix and match that we do here. I mean, let's just talk about a single varietal grape.
Sure.
Like Riesling. You have the way to just manipulate that tremendously and end up with orange wines or very fresh, tart, crisp wines, or just from the process, starting with the same grape.
This is I'm going to break from the topic for a second, but this is, I can't help myself. Natural wines is this big movement where a lot of people are talking about winemakers having as much of a hands-off role in the production of wine as possible, letting the harvest determine the wine, letting the fruit determine what's going to come out of it, and doing as little manipulation as possible, if any. If you were to talk to some, they would suggest you're not manipulating at all.
I know,
it seems so ironic to me that you have to make all of these decisions, very tiny little decisions about how to handle that fruit.
And they do too. I mean, Gideon, when we went to Gideon, Gideon's a very, minimalist sort of wine producers.
Sure.
Now, natural connotates all
But he
sorts of
still has to
things.
make decisions.
Of course, absolutely. He's making
Lots
all
of
these
them.
decisions, mostly in the vineyard, but also once it's in the cellar. He's making decisions all the time. Oh yeah, I think that's ready. I'm going to press it off now. A major decision
The
that's
fruit
taking
didn't
place.
decide that.
It
Gideon
doesn't.
did.
Wine doesn't make itself, just so you know. Fruit will ferment and actually produce a little bit of alcohol if it in those right environment as it sits in the skins underneath the tree that it fell from. But to make this takes a lot of intervention, whether it's natural or not.
Sure. Now, clearly, what Gideon might do would be far, far less than what's a commercial industrial wine.
Oh yeah,
Of course,
absolutely.
they're two big extremes.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of decision making that winemakers need to be educated about and need to make good decisions about in order to make any wine, even if it's a natural wine.
Yeah.
So before we try these wines, because now they've got off topic.
Why'd you bring up natural wines?
Well, because you were talking, we're talking about all the ways in which all these decisions that we have to make. And it's always, I just brought it up because that's always something that's been a challenge for me to get my head around, is this natural wine movement,
Right.
is where do they draw the line? So which decisions do they say it's okay to make and still be called a natural wine?
Yeah.
And which decisions is it not okay to make?
Yeah, Nico and I had a great discussion
Yeah, I'd
about
love
this
to
the other
be
night,
on that
and that
one.
was a lot of fun because he's dedicated to a very natural process, biodynamic approach to crafting his wines. But the first thing I said was, well, define natural. What is a natural wine to you? And, at one point in our discussions, I said, but us humans are part of the biosphere. We've created glass, we've created electricity, we've created wires, we've created snippers to prune the grapes. Is that still natural, or is that not natural because we've created it? Or is everything natural?
All of the things that he does in his vineyards to produce the quality fruit that he's looking for.
Yeah.
All of the efforts that the biodynamic process in itself is not a natural process.
No, it's
You
something
don't
that
bury
Rudolf
a point.
Steiner came up with.
Yeah, it's a technology,
Right.
if you will,
Right.
and so even in the vineyard. So I think this is an ongoing
Remember that. This is early on when we were commercial, 2012 or something like that. We went down to the Lower West Side of Manhattan to hear that talk. That's where Ray Isles
right.
was, and they
That
brought
was
out
the
Clark Smith.
conversation about
And it was about natural wine. And Clark Smith was there as the evil, heavy manipulator who uses reverse osmosis to take out smoke taint and adjust alcohol levels. And this other flamboyant California Chardonnay maker who, I do nothing. I put it in the barrel and the grapes turn into wine, and it's just lovely. And then that was it. It was like, wow. And Clark's like, really? So you don't have any electricity in your winemaking area? Do you use a press to squeeze off those Chardonnay grapes before you magically turn them into wine? It was a great discussion.
Yeah,
a lot of fun. But let's get right to the point here
Before we go to that,
all
I'm
right.
gonna check in the audience.
Well, this is pretty good. We're going to get into oak here, but we've been
We have some new
dancing.
people showed up. Look, Mark Leclerc showed up.
Mark
Hey.
Leclerc.
Yeah.
All right. He's got quite a few barrels now too.
Yeah, we haven't seen Mark in a while. It'd be great to catch
We
up.
gotta drop in on his place.
So yeah, so do you. So if you don't know, Mark Leclerc is the owner of Seven Birches Winery in Lincoln, New Hampshire, and he's doing some fun stuff. He's got a great tasting room up there, and so if you haven't been to Seven Birches,
Definitely beautiful area.
put it on your list. It's about 45 minutes north
From
of
here? Yeah.
Yeah. So
Easy.
You do the circle, and so thanks. Good to see you, Mark. Hope you're still there. And let's see. It was great cheese quiche yesterday. Matt's talking about his quiche.
Oh, these wines are just developing beautifully.
And Marianne is here. So, all right, we don't have any questions.
Marianne,
so we'll get
excellent.
Back to the,
all right.
conversation. So now I get to drink wine. But you know what?
So what I wanted to do with
Wait a
these,
minute, we're 30 minutes in, and
I know.
having my first sip of wine.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm about to pour some
So
more in here, but
I should try the
Well, what's-
non-oaked version first, right?
I either way, they're so remarkably different. And these start off as the exact same wine. And again, so our 3 honey wine is a show mead. It's literally just honey, water, and yeast that goes into producing it. And it spends its entire life in stainless steel. It's fermented in stainless steel. It's aged in stainless steel. It never sees any oak as oak staves or anything else, and then is put into bottle. And the
Night and day.
night and day. And the 3 Honey Gold is the exact same wine after it's become wine. it is put into an oak barrel and left in that oak barrel for 6 months, 9 months, a year, depending on how it's developing. And the results, because this is such a delicate, transparent wine, it really shows the oak impact. I love having both of these on our tasting menu bar when we have it. And this one's, the 3 Honey Gold is in the State Liquor Store, and I'm actually having a little bit of a challenge keeping up with the demand.
It's really amazing. It's really become very popular.
It's growing nicely on that. And I'm getting more honey from Troy this year to make sure I put up another few barrels to keep up with the state.
Good. And Geraldine.
And Geraldine, of course. She likes the regular 3 Honey more than the gold.
She does, but you still got to make the regular
I know.
first, remember?
Yes.
So, question, you put it in oak, new oak, neutral oak that another wine was in, which I think you said already. So, right? So there's a lot of variations, a lot of decisions you have to make right out of the gate before you even get to the barrel.
Part of it actually, it's not an ideal world at all times. I don't get to just sit back and go, okay, I'm going to put it in a brand new oak barrel, because I might not have a brand new oak barrel at that moment when I need to put it in the barrel. And this one in particular, I want to put into a used barrel that previously had a red wine, because I want some of the color. So the barrel is porous. It's made out of white oak, French white oak or American white oak. The ones we have are mostly French white oak. The oak trees grow for a couple centuries and are cut down and cut into these planks, and then those are air dried for 2 to 3 years. They let those staves get all of the sap out of it for the barrels, for constructing the barrel.
1 to 3 years, actually.
1 to 3 years, okay. So as quickly as 1 year. Okay. And then those are cut and moistened with water and formed into the shapes, and then assembled into the barrel and then toasted. And Chuck was telling me that, there's Quercus something or other and Quercus something else, Americanus. There's a different pore structure in French oak as opposed to American oak.
French oak trees grow. It's partly the way in which they're purposeful about this with the trees that they're farming, but they grow much slower.
Yeah, they're very slow growing.
So slow growing, as you know, the rings of a tree are closer together.
Really close together.
When something's growing slowly, and a pine tree, they're really far apart because it's growing very rapidly, and lots of wood pulp is created each year. So the French oak trees have these really tight rings, which means less transition of air through the barrel.
It's a tighter barrel. Barrel. That's what I heard. It's a less oxidative environment than the American white oak.
I read as low as 25% oxygen through the barrel versus 50%.
Yeah,
I forget the ratio. That's not accurate the way I just said it. It's a ratio, but it's the French oak barrels produce about half as much of
the way I read it was in ppm per month. So red wines can absorb quite a bit more than an oak barrel will provide. That's where these micro-ox concepts have come in. But it's in that 25 or 50 ppm of oxygen that's provided by the barrel. And French oak is tighter, providing less than the American oak.
Half is what I read.
Yeah.
There's debate about this. I mean, this isn't a perfect science. They don't know exactly.
No, it's really fascinating.
Every piece of wood is different, right? Every tree is different. Everything is different.
And every barrel, they can come from the exact same producers. I've spoken to winemakers at wineries where they bring in hundreds of barrels, and they've developed a relationship with a cooperage that's going to supply the sorts of barrels that they want, the profile that they want, the toast levels, the types of toast levels, the aging, and everything. And even still, if they bring in 100 barrels, which the producer has said, this is exactly what you want, these are 100 barrels, this is what they are, there's variability within those, which makes sense. These are trees.
They're trees.
Trees.
All natural.
All natural. Here we are with the natural part again. Yeah, heavily manipulated natural product.
Well, think about it. There's
But it
another
is.
variable. The barrels are manipulated.
Oh yeah,
So the natural winemakers who are putting their wine in
in barrels.
are making decisions about what those barrels
Yeah,
are going to
Clark
taste
brought
like.
that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could talk about that for a
Yeah,
long time. Maybe
yeah.
we should do an episode on that. Maybe we should
Natural wine?
find someone who considers himself. Oh wait, maybe we could have this debate. With
Let's get Nico and
here.
Clark on.
Yeah, that would be great. You guys would have fun with that.
Wow,
I'm sure.
wow, that would be cool.
Nico,
So
if you didn't know, he's been on the show before.
he's right here in New Hampshire.
He's in Concord.
Outside of Concord.
He's working. He's a winemaker. It used to be called Mermaid Hill, but they changed the name.
Yep, I don't know the new one either.
Yeah.
He'll be in my backyard later this week. I sent him a couple
Manipulating
pictures.
the grapes?
Yes, manipulating the grapes. Some of them are starting to turn color.
Sorry, Nico, if you're
Right.
watching.
No, he's a great guy.
Yeah,
So night and day, right?
night and day.
Flavor wise.
Yeah, and for me, I prefer the oak aged one. Geraldine clearly prefers the cleaner, more honey present.
It's much more.
Three.
This is just a beautiful honey.
Yeah,
And to me, they're so distinctive that they each have a place and they cannot be swapped for one another.
sure.
So if I'm sitting down to some spicy green curry or something like that, it's the regular 3 honey. If I'm grabbing a book to read by the fire, it's a bottle of 3 honey gold. And they're just different vehicles,
We've talked
different
about
things
this
to
a
get
lot.
into.
This is something that really intrigues me as well. And a lot of people are always asking me, "What's your favorite wine?"
Yeah.
And I've come up with the answer. I stole it from somebody else. I'm sure it's the one in my class. And and really that's just an entry to an educational experience. And I think about this every day when when I'm settling in for the evening and I'm getting ready to choose which alcoholic beverage I want to pursue. I first go through all these decisions about, okay, what am I having for dinner? What's the progression of my evening going to be like? Who am I going to be spending that evening with? Is it winter, summer, fall?
Right.
What are all, there's so many variables that I want to think about. And I don't, it's not like this conscious, I'm not like going through a checklist.
No, I know.
Head.
Right.
My
But
brain already knows enough. I've done this enough, chosen drinks enough times that I quickly get to a place where today, maybe I'm not having a wine, I'm going to have a beer.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm going to jump right into a gin and tonic and start with spirits. Or I'm getting ready to have a certain kind of meal that's going to go well with wine. I better start with wine and enjoy that through my meal.
Yeah.
So there's all these variables that we have to think about when we choose, even the, as all things go, relatively subtle differences between these two. I mean, they're extremely different, but they're subtly different when you compare, say, this and this.
Right.
That's an extreme.
I was trying to, the analogy to music again, choosing what kind of music you're going to put on is the same sort of thing. What do you want to listen to?
What's the mood?
So what I was then trying to go with is, what does oak bring to a wine in terms of music? Is this a bass line? Is this a rhythm section? Is this the vocals? What is oak in a wine? Because it clearly changes the wine. And sometimes it's kind of subtle, sometimes it's not. But it could be the drum beat. It could be it is a structural thing. And drumming, the bass lines is often sort of sets the pace, sets the tone. And an oak wine has a certain sort of character that's different from an unoaked, from a Nouveau Beaujolais or a Pet Nat, or something that's done in a different way doesn't have. And I can't find a good analogy for it. It's not direct, because
if you were to say it was the drum beat, then what happens when you have an unoaked wine? Do you take the
there's
drums out?
no drums.
We can't suggest that would be the case, because I could imagine.
Well, you could, because you can just hit on your guitar.
Yeah.
You still
more about this. This is another show, I think.
I think it might be.
We'll have to get Clark on to talk about it.
So the particulars of this barrel that you're asking about, the reality is it's in my notes, but I don't know exactly which barrel this went into. I think it was number 26. And what I was looking for was a barrel that I had recently taken red wine out of to follow through with the 3 honey.
Now,
And
let's be clear. When you say you took red wine out, there isn't any red wine in the barrel. When you take the wine out of the barrel, you wash it with a barrel washer that sprays.
Good. So that is the progression. So what I mean is a barrel had a red wine in it just previously. I take that red wine out, and then I rinse and clean that barrel. So I rinse it out thoroughly.
Yeah.
And so water is running clear. I'm ozonating. Ozone water is rinsing the inside of that barrel until the runnings are clear.
Right.
There's no evidence of wine in that barrel. However, that red wine had been sitting in that barrel for a year, let's say, and it soaks in to the wood.
Changes the
and
color.
Rinsing it changes the color of the wood in it, and rinsing it doesn't get that all out.
Right.
And
it's the stain.
It's sort of a stain, but it's a very dense sponge, if you will. So it's holding a little bit of the wine in there. So when I put this clear wine into it, over time, it pulls some of that color out of the wood into the wine. You will get some color from the barrel, even if it's a brand new barrel, because toasted oak releases a color.
Well, the most amazing thing is the day that I learned that whiskey starts out the same color as vodka, clear.
Yeah.
And the color,
all brown spirits start clear,
is entirely made brown from aging in a barrel. 100%.
Yeah.
Well, there's probably some spirits that there's some color manufacturers that are putting.
They're using coloration now all the time.
Your premium spirits are colored entirely by how long they've been in the barrel. So the darker the spirit, the more time it's spent in barrel. That blew me away when I learned that.
So tequila, they have the Blanco, which has no barrel aging, and it's white. They have the Reposado, which has got this lightish sort of color, a nice touch of it, and then the Añejo, which is a heavier oaky beast of tequila. So they've got three major categories of how they handle their oak. Handling bourbon in this country has to be American white oak, and it has to be brand new. You can't reuse the bourbon barrel to make bourbon. It can't legally be called bourbon.
A lot of people always wonder about these rules, right? So they have these very hard and fast rules that you can only use new oak and has to be so much time in that barrel. There's all these very hard.
Rioja for their reds, they have strict protocols.
All across the world, they have these strict protocols. And I always think to myself, I wonder what that's about and try and understand it. But as I've learned about the wine industry, there's a lot of sense to that. So what it's done is it's made bourbon a very specific thing, because there's this perfect set of rules that you have to follow to get from point A to point B. Within those rules, you're allowed to create some variation, but bourbon is bourbon is bourbon. No matter who produces, those rules are so broad in terms of their impact that the amount of time in barrel, the new oak barrel, those are very specific ways in which that bourbon is going to be impacted. And so the subtle changes that the individual producers make create variations on bourbon, but it's still very much
bourbon. It's bourbon.
I liken that to the racetrack. NASCAR, and I don't know a lot about racing, I'm sure many of you know more than I do, but as I understand it, NASCAR has very clear ruls about what your car can be and how much horsepower, how much weight, tires,
the weight,
everything, right? It's just creating a benchmark, and then it's the race car driver and a few other nuances in the mechanics that create the difference between that 1/60th of a second win that somebody might have. It's the same thing. Your wine or your bourbon or your beverage might be better in one area than somebody else's, but you're all starting from the same benchmark. So it levels the playing field.
And in the wine world, quite frankly, the goal, I think, in all of these well-established areas like Spain or France or Italy, where they have big regulatory bodies, it's about quality control to the rest of the world. So when you buy an Italian Valpolicella, you know the character and quality of that wine hits a minimum quality standard, and that's it. Or if you buy a Barolo, or if you get this, you know that it's going to have this sort of character to it. And the only way to do that is to have some guidelines. So you can't just throw this stuff all over the place and go. So it's That's good. We need to get on to the other wine because I know we're moving along here and we're going to run out of time before we even get to the next one. I've got to get 4 more glasses. All right?
Yes, and when you do, can you get me 2 batteries?
Batteries? You're running out of power?
It's done.
It's done? My goodness. Wow. That's no good, Bob.
I know.
So,
So bear with us a moment while we change batteries. While we do this, I'm going to check in with the audience.
that sounds good.
But you actually,
I'll go
once
get
you
batteries.
go back there, they won't be able to hear me. So you better go.
So everybody can hear me right now as I'm talking in the back of the room, grabbing some batteries, but no one can hear Bob out front because he's without batteries. But it's the way it goes. All right, here we are, technologically advanced. I really wanted to get your insights on this new Petit Blue Reserve too. That's I'm very excited. These were on the right side of the box. I don't know if those were charged or not. And here's some regular ones.
This one, no.
Okay, I thought they might not be. So
Hey, let me get these in.
yeah,
Okay.
for people out there, you know, when
Testing.
you go
I
to
think we're good now.
when you go to the wine shop, you can probably one of the easiest ways to go is to look for Chardonnay that is unoaked or oaked. And you can do this at home. Go to the liquor store, buy an unoaked Chardonnay, buy a oaked Chardonnay, and compare the two. And I think you'll see not only is there oak storage that's going on, but typically they'll put the Chardonnay through a malolactic secondary fermentation with a bacteria that softens it and changes it, makes it a little more buttery in character. But you'll see the wine is much different because of it.
I had some fun when we were exploring the California Shards versus a Burgundy.
Oh yeah,
So I
that
think,
was nice.
I think
Yeah, that was night and day. That's a good way to do it right there.
I think that's the best
Yeah.
way to do it because it's not just the oak, but it's complete variation on the way in which that wine is made. It's
Yeah.
more, if you want
Same
to just
grapes.
explore the oak, then go to Sonoma and choose a Sonoma oak and a Sonoma non-oak and
Right.
see what they're doing. That'll minimize the variables, but it really is cool to see the difference between a French Chardonnay and a California Chardonnay. But before you taste these, we'll go back here for
I
a
can't
second.
wait. No, sorry.
Greg's on.
Greg.
Nice to see you, Greg.
All
Glad
right,
you could
excellent.
join us. Sorry about the mic problem. Let's see what has
Oh.
here.
Yeah. We're just releasing this wine today, everybody. No one's had it yet. It's the 2018 vintage Petit Blue Reserve.
So Greg says, well, if you
Lagunitas. We
if you
made
make
that.
the road
We
trip,
made that road trip there.
Lagunitas Brewery in Petaluma and Russian River Brewery,
We went up there.
just up
Pliny
the
the
road,
Elder.
Pliny the Elder. Funny you should mention that, Greg, because last
We
time
went-
we were in California,
We went right there.
we were at both those
Of
our
course.
first 2 places we
Of
visited
course,
after
yes.
getting off the plane.
Yes.
So, great minds think alike.
Yes,
He says,
absolutely.
road trip.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, it'll take a plane trip first.
for
Although
us
we will be driving out to California soon.
to get on our bicycle.
Get on our bicycle. That's right. All right.
So what's interesting about barrels too that people may not know is that they're wood, so they're cellulose, and when you toast things, you actually create some sugars from the wood, and you create these other tannins called gallic tannins that have different flavors.
More variables.
So you get this tapestry of other contributions to your wine
Right.
from that toasted oak. It's the same thing like toasting bread. If you toast bread
All different.
very, very
degrees of
lightly,
toast.
a little bit
Yeah.
more, all the way to black,
Tastes different.
it has a different flavor to it.
So I want to just bring this out right now. This is a good time because we're talking about all these little nuances. What I say to people when I've given tours in the past and I talk about this process with our guests, I talk about the idea that barrel room is your spice cabinet.
Spice cabinet.
And I think it's such a perfect analogy because A chef, when making great food, has a collection of spices that they know will impact, and it's a huge collection. I mean, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of spices, and the decisions you make about the combination of those spices and the varying percentages of different spices create very different foods. So it's almost infinite for the chef how spices from their spice rack are going to interact with the finished flavor of their food. At the same time, a chef may determine that some foods are wonderful all on their own.
Right.
They don't need any spice. And so you as the winemaker get to kind of make that
thing.
same decision.
This is just super
Leave
slow
the
cooking.
Spice out. Yeah. So as a chef, when you go into the barrel room with a wine, you're making decisions about which spices that you want to incorporate. Yeah. And there are dozens and dozens of different ways that you get to choose. Some by happenstance, well, we don't have any new oak barrels today.
Right.
And some very consciously, I'm going to choose this barrel for this reason. Nonetheless, you're going to impart varying degrees of different spices that are in your quiver to determine the finished flavor of the wine you're making.
Absolutely. It's a perfect analogy. It is a spice cabinet. And what's interesting is a lot of it's kind of like making tea. So you're infusing a liquid with these spices. And, you know, if you leave your tea bag in the water
too long,
2 minutes or 3 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour,
begins to get
you're
bitter.
Getting different stuff out of it.
Yes.
So same thing with the barrel.
Exactly.
You can get different components. You can over oak a wine. You can put too much spice in there. Like, you know, putting too much salt in your food. You just made it too salty. But this is another example.
The first thing I notice when I look at this example is the color. The Petite Blue is much lighter, and the Reserve is much more ruby, much darker color.
Yeah.
And,
a little bit of that is from filtration.
Okay.
The regular Petite Blue is filtered.
Okay.
And the Petite Blue Reserve was not filtered. But part of it is in the fermentation and production of this wine. So the Petite Blue Reserve stays on the skins longer. And there I pull out some of the more complex, richer, drier, more austere components and the grippy finish on it. The regular Petite Blue, I free run it off, or I pull it off the skins earlier to capture that fresh fruitiness. You still get that tannic grip to it.
Sure, softer.
But wait till you try these two, because I think this is really, I want to hear your response.
I want to try, but before you just brought up something I wanted to ask you about the 3 honey. I noticed a significant amount of tannin in the 3 honey gold. There was a very drying effect. Yeah. And you used a neutral barrel. So I've always had the impression that neutral barrels gave off 0 or at the very least very little tannin, but that clearly wasn't demonstrated in that wine.
I don't think that's the case with neutral barrels. I think what happens with neutral barrels is you don't get the oak aromas and flavors like the vanilla or the cigar.
But you do get tannin.
But you get tannin.
Because I
think
clearly
you'll always get tannin. I think you always get tannin out of barrel. It's been my experience. I always get tannin. What blows my mind is I have a little barrel that I've put lots of wine through, and I still get a lot of oak flavors from the barrel.
Wow.
It's just not going neutral. And I put all sorts of stuff through it. It's crazy. So there's a big tannic backbone to this. These are slightly different also. The regular 3 honey is back sweetened just a touch. Okay. So there is a little bit of sweetness, and you have more perception of those honey aromas. So you're tricking your brain into thinking sweet as you go into it. Whereas with the 3 honey gold, the barrel breathes. Here's some important for those of you who don't know this out there. A barrel is a spice cabinet where you're adding flavors and character to the wine. But just as significantly in the process of putting a wine in barrel are 2 other things that happen. One is micro-oxygenation, and we talked a little bit about this. This comes out of cement tanks or the rest of it. Little bits of oxygen coming into the wine, very critical when the wine is young. It's just finished fermenting, it's finding its structure, and as you introduce oxygen to it, it changes it biochemically, and it develops and builds a structure. The other things that barrels do is they breathe, they evaporate off wine. It's called the angel share that goes off, and
1
we
to 2
lose
bottles a month.
Yeah, I lose about 1 liter a month in the area. So if you've got a wine in barrel for a year, you've lost over a case of wine. Poof, gone, just disappears. I know you think I'm down there sampling way more than I should.
I'm
but
just down there sitting in the barrel room going,
just breathing heavy. In our barrel room, it's interesting, when the environment that the barrels sit in affects how those barrels influence the wine. This is another thing. There's another magical threshold
yet another
of like 73% relative humidity. If you're below that, if the room is fairly dry, it pulls the water out of the wine, changing the relative amount of alcohol in the wine going up. So your wine actually increases in alcohol, in ABV. If the cellar is very humid, over 73% relative humidity, the water doesn't come out of the wine, the alcohol goes out of the wine.
You reduce the
and
alcohol.
you reduce the ABV of the wine.
So what are we doing?
We do a highly variable sliding scale because here in New England, it gets very, very dry in the wintertime. I run a humidifier, but it doesn't keep up. So we go from about 30% relative humidity up to around 70 to 80 during the summer or real rainy months. So what are your first impressions here?
First, very different.
They're very different, aren't
Very
they?
different.
This particular Petit Blue Reserve is the farthest out I've ever driven a Petit Blue Reserve.
So
It's different than any and all other Petit Blue Reserves.
That's where I was gonna go. I'm further away from blueberry than I've ever been before.
Yeah.
But the blueberry is lost in this one. It's still remarkably subtle in this one. I find that your Petit Blue, your bodies come up on the Petit Blue, so it's got more body in my mouth,
But you're losing some of the blueberry?
but it's the fruitiness is less distinct blueberry. And I would be if you again, and this is true all the time anyway. If somebody tries our blueberry wine and we don't tell them there's blueberry in it, very few people ever identify blueberry. It's very, very subtle, the characteristics that are coming from blueberry. But as we always talk about, a wine is always more than the sum of its parts.
Absolutely.
And that's occurring distinctly in both of these. They're both evolving into something that's more mature and more, I think, interesting because of it.
Yeah, I think they're both really, I'm really pleased with the way these wines came out.
But this one has...
There's a lot going on.
That's what I was going to say. There's so much going on.
There's a lot going on in this wine.
I'm getting these smells. I don't know what they are.
Yeah.
These nuances on the nose. I can't identify them.
I really flirted with death on this one.
Glad you just tell me.
So you know. Well, there was a time when you said, well, you're going to take this out of barrel, because I gave you a sample of it out of barrel about 2 years ago. And you're like, you're going to pull that out soon? And I said, well, I know I'm flirting with the edge here, because it was developing some VA. It was developing some other less desirable components, but it's not there anymore. No. It's integrated. And it brings out these sweet notes. They're not bourbon-y, but there's...
I mean, it might be there, but it's just integrated.
It's there, and I'm sure it's there, but you just don't know it anymore. And it has this sort of burnt, sweet, savory character to it, which is amazing to me, because it starts off as the same wine. It's just fermented blueberries. And so the barrel, this is like that deep blue reserve. It's got this other thing going on, these dried fruits that adds this tawny, interesting character to it.
A new oak or neutral oak?
I'll have to look that one up. I think it was probably middle sort of usage on the oak.
Yeah, because I remember it was
mid-range.
I don't remember which year it was, but we got some new oak. This is the first time you put Petit Blue in oak. This is probably 18, I think.
Well, when we get in those new barrels, so as we grow here at Hermit Woods, we'll bring in an additional 8 barrels or something like that. And I don't just put all of one batch of wine in all those new oak barrels. So I'll partition them out.
Right.
So 2 of those barrels may go to Red Scare, and the rest of Red Scares in
So you don't
middle or older ones.
Gives you more control.
It gives me more control because those barrels are going to produce a lot of oak, very clean, expressive character oak alone. And the other barrels are going to bring something else because they had other wines in them. So very, very interesting format. So this, we only have like 30 cases of this or something like that. So it's a smaller portion.
Wow.
And,
Well, how did that happen?
because it was just 1 barrel. Or I have, maybe it was 2 barrels. I just took it off a stack. Yeah, we had, you get about 25 cases out of a barrel. I don't think I had 50 to begin with.
How much of a reserve do you usually make?
I usually make
a couple hundred cases, don't you?
Yeah, a couple hundred cases. Right. So this is a small run. And then I have the 20, which is already in bottle.
It's going in the library, right?
Which I put some in the library this afternoon when I was restocking it.
So this is a good, we're coming to the end of the show. We should open up.
Oh yeah,
Gary's
let's try
wine.
this. Oh,
Let's get another.
more
I'll
glasses.
open it up while you get Gary's.
Okay.
So Gary.
Is Gary
thank
still
you.
on there?
I don't know. Gary, are you still here? Let's see. Gary, let us make yourself known if you are here. We're going to open your wine. That's great. Greg's answering Matt's questions. They got a great dialogue going on about the eggs. Thank you, Greg, for answering some of those questions.
Good.
And Gary is still here, so good. We're going to open your wine.
So this is a wine made by a friend of Gary's. Gary, this guy gave Gary a bunch of wine, as I gather. He shared a couple others. He shared a blueberry wine. Remember from the 90s that we opened up and put around the tasting room. The cork's looking a little
look at that cork.
iffy there.
It's a natural cork, 100% natural cork. But boy, it's looking. Look at that.
That's for natural.
Oh, you know what? Just a Sharpie. He used a Sharpie to black. That's what that is. Look. He didn't want you to know which winery it was from.
Oh my God. Wow.
He must have got some corks from some other winery.
So this is going to change quite a bit because it's a 2012. So we've just exposed it to the air. There was quite a bit of ullage in this bottle. The wine was only up to the bottom of the neck. So there was a lot more air in this wine. So we'll see.
We just pulled this cork out. I just learned this the other day, and I don't know where you stand on this, but I have been told for years that when you're at a restaurant and they pull a cork and they put it on the table in front of you, and then they pour your wine, and lots of people always say, don't bother smelling the cork. It doesn't have any meaning. You're just smelling cork. You really just want to smell the wine. But I read this great article, I think it was Wine Enthusiast, and they said, no, that's absolutely not true. You should always smell the cork, and here's why. And this makes total sense. So if TCA is beginning to take effect on the wine,
you'll notice it right here.
This is the first place you're going to notice it. And you may not be able to pick it up in the wine yet.
Yeah.
So, and what they pointed out is that once air interacts with the wine, that the TCA, that bacteria, will start to interact with the air, and the wine will taste fine initially. But
and then
20 minutes later, it degrades rapidly as the air and the TCA mix together.
Interesting.
And so they said, if you smell the cork and you get the musty basement on the cork,
you know you've got an issue.
then you know without having to taste the wine, and then you're not going to have the risk of 20 minutes after you say okay to the server, your wine now tastes like
terrible. Right.
Basement.
Right.
So you should smell the cork. I didn't know that. That's really great.
Smell your corks.
Smell your cork. So you're looking for TCA. You're looking for the beginnings of TCA. So this is the one right here. Look at the color. It's clearly aging. It's got some brick color to it.
Yep.
Just like a grape wine would age.
So this will probably evolve and change.
It's got the...
oh, it's very floral.
Yeah.
Almost like a flower.
It does have some of the raisiny character, bourbon.
I don't know. I get a lot of spice. This allspice sort of nutmeg.
Yeah. I like it. I like the nose.
It's really. It doesn't smell like a blueberry wine at all.
No, not at all.
Wow.
So it's sweeter. It's probably 4 or 5% residual sugar. Not overly sweet.
Nice.
And
It's not super flavorful, compared to some of the intensity of these other ones, but it's really well structured.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice balance. It is a little sweet, but I think that's sort of
stylistically
typical of what
going
most
for.
people do anyway with fruit wines. They hit this sort of middle weight. It helps fill out the body that fruit wines often will end up being kind of hollow. But that's really nice.
It does have a port-like character to me.
A little port.
It's not heavy enough to be a port, and clearly the alcohol isn't there, but it has that ruby port characteristic to me. And I think that's some of the age as well.
That's nice. Costanzo's Wine Cellar.
There it is.
Very nice, Gary. Thank you.
Hold that up to the camera there.
2012
Costanzo.
vintage.
Very nice. You did an excellent job. I'm very pleased.
Very nice.
So we're only 6 minutes over. Look at that.
That's not too bad.
Not too bad.
So, to recap on all this, we talked about what barrels bring to wines and chose a couple sort of side by side to showcase that. But it's fun to explore and to think about when you go and pick up a bottle of wine. This to me doesn't seem oaked at all.
No.
Now maybe there were some oak chips that went into this, but I don't really detect them at all. Mm-mm. But it's fun to try to think about that when you try wines, whether or not there was oak there. I had a Sauvignon Blanc the other day, and I typically don't think of oak aged, but this was clearly oak aged Sauv Blanc, and it added a nice character to it. It was good.
Another thing that's important to note: a lot of people still think of oak barrels as a way in which one would store wine, and it is absolutely not the choice anybody would make as a way to store wine. Their size and shape make them very awkward.
Oh, they're a pain in the butt to deal with.
They have a little tiny hole to put the wine in and take it out from. So as a storage vessel in the modern day, an oak barrel is the worst choice. The only reason a winemaker is going to use a barrel is for the spice cabinet, the enhancement.
Right.
Now, 200 years ago, the oak barrel was damn near the ideal choice for a container to store wine.
Sailing ships, right?
One guy could get a 500-pound barrel of liquid onto a ship by themselves.
Yep.
Up a shallow ramp, because not only does it roll nicely, but it steers.
Yeah,
the shape of it.
Yeah, you can rock it. You can rock it and turn it,
and steer it and spin it. And you want somebody to handle a barrel who knows how to do that. It's pretty amazing. So in the days of old, oak barrels were very much the container of choice. They had other advantages. They were very sturdy. The shape and design makes them very rugged, so they could roll around. They can crash around in the ship, and they're not going to break. And you can put lots of different things in barrels. So barrels a few hundred years ago were ideal. We didn't have stainless steel then, and amphoras and concrete materials could break. They're fragile, even though they're heavy, ridiculously heavy. So barrels were of a very different purpose at one point. And it'd be interesting to know when winemakers started to realize, because at one point the technology to create a barrel didn't exist, and so clearly barrels probably started out as a invention that allowed people to store and move wine around. And somebody came along one day and goes, "Wait a minute, this barrel is also offering me some other characteristics." That would be an interesting study to figure out when that happened.
I thought in some of the readings about some of the growth and expansion of wine out of Europe into Great Britain and elsewhere, that, the French made their Burgundy and they put it in a barrel just to bring it to London. And the people in London were going, "Whoa, this wine is unbelievable." And the French are like, "Well, it's just our wine." And then they tried some in London. They're like, oh my goodness, this is a lot better than we're drinking at home. So they started putting it in barrels strictly to make a better wine, even though they kept it there.
So
they
maybe
didn't
that's
transport it.
that's what
I remember reading something
yeah,
like that.
no, that's what I'm
yeah.
talking about, is that transition when somebody finally woke up one day and went,
Yeah.
wow, wait a minute,
Yeah.
this is more than just a place to store our wine.
Yeah.
So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about barrels and other ways in which people store wine. There's infinite topics that we can continue on down this road.
And Matt wants to do something with a barrel, right? He wants to sponsor a barrel or something like that.
Yeah, well, he's talking about that,
out.
and we have to figure out a way to do that. I think it's a good idea. I know at Seven Birches, you can there's the Barrel Club, and you
They
can
have a
sponsor
club
a barrel
format, right?
Yeah, you can actually buy a barrel, and it's your barrel, and all the wine in that barrel is yours. So
well, I think, if someone really likes Petit Bleu and they want 25 cases of it, that's what's in a barrel.
That's a lot of wine.
It is a lot of wine.
I can't. No, he must not have that. I can't imagine somebody having an entire barrel on their own. Maybe.
Why not?
That'd be great. So anyway, thank you for spending another Monday. I'm going to switch over here, and thank you for spending your time with us. I'll say hello to anybody else. Night, guys. Janice is leaving us. Gary says enjoy. Thank you, Gary.
Yes, thank you very much.
And Greg definitely agrees. Smell the cork first. Hint of funk. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're on board with that. So anyway, thank you all. We're going to sign off now, and we hope you join us next week.
What's next week? Virtual tasting probably coming up now.
I think it's a tasting. Yeah. Next week is a tasting. If you want to buy the wines in advance, go on our website. We're going to be listing the wines that we're going to be tasting next week. And we're going to do a virtual tasting. So hope you can join us for that. So signing off. Have a good evening. Great spending the afternoon or evening with you.
Drink natural wine.
Drink natural. No, drink our wine. Blueberry, Petit Bleu.
Oh, this is all natural.
All natural.
Our wines are all natural. Completely natural. 100% natural.
All right. Good night, folks.
Good night.